is like the hardcore class of all the 6 or 7 sessions that we have. We've had fun so far. Today we're going to get into some deep. So we're going to have like 2 sessions. The first one will focus on the tech part, and that's going to be taken by Ranjini, and I'll introduce her in just a bit. So that's kind of we'll go into the black box. We'll get into LLMs and etc. etc. So for some of you, most of you, it will be fascinating. For some of you, might think it's too technical, but it isn't. And then Sudhir, whom also I'll introduce, and I will kind of team up for the second part. Yeah, and that's going to be like more on use case, okay, but enterprise use case, business use case, stuff which is going to be real. Again, as I said today, both of them are like the meaty, hardcore parts of the entire course. So with that, let me first introduce Ranjini, and I'm so glad that she's here. Ranjini has flown in with her daughter and her husband from Bangalore, where she lives. And we've known each other for a very long time, but we met for the first time today.
Yeah.
Okay. And Ranjini heads analytics globally for Atlassian. Any of you heard of Atlassian?
Nice.
Nice. Can you tell the products of Atlassian, for example? Jira. Huh? There it goes.
Yeah.
Trello.
Absolutely.
So actually this company is known by its products in a sense, and some amazing products. And she heads, as I said, analytics globally. We knew each other from her last job where she was with VMware, and she's been in analytics for the last close to 20 years plus. Ranjini also is one of our most well-known women tech leaders in the country, and she's amazingly out there, visible on social media. You should absolutely go to her amazing podcast, which she does every 15 days.
Yeah, every 2 weeks.
I was there on one of them.
You were the guest. Yeah, I was privileged to have you.
There's an amazing podcast on different tech stuff, and other commentary on other tech, and therefore you definitely would want to continue knowing her beyond the day. And what she's going to be talking about is what is there in the on the slide today. I'm also very thrilled that she's made her slides on a particular software which I particularly like, called Beautiful.ai. You have Beautiful.ai. It's an amazing thing to make slides on. But with that, over to you.
Thank you, JB. So good to be here. The first thing I told JB is it reminds me of being in B school. I did my post-graduation in MICA. So very, very fond memories. So it's so good to see you folks as well. JB, you kind of introduced it as hardcore stuff and not fun. I hope it is the opposite of not fun. I'm trying to demystify it while not getting too technical as well, right? So first of all, before we kind of get into this, I wanted to understand like the composition and the make of this class. So show of hands, how many of you have actually played around with, say, ChatGPT? Wow, nice. All right. What about any kind of visual LLMs, right? Like say DALL-E, Midjourney? Nice. Okay. How many from software engineering backgrounds? Okay. All right. That's fine. Science background. Okay. Computer science background. Okay. So there's this book I highly recommend called Medici Effect, right? It talks about how genius lies at intersection of different backgrounds. So not just engineering. If you bring in engineering with arts and humanities, you tend to do great, right? So I love the mix over here. The crowd is great. So let's kind of get into what is it that we'll talk about today, right? And I'm going to keep it very interactive. Love to hear questions from you guys. I was thinking about what do we talk about, right? I wanted to talk at a high level in terms of how does this work when we say this black box, right? When we type in questions and we get all of these answers, how does this really work? We'll talk a bit about how does GenAI work. To start with that, start with some foundations in terms of how do supervised models work, and then tying it back to human values, right? There is the underlying technology behind this, the generative pre-trained transformer. I heard that you all did a course around prompt engineering as well. We'll try to understand a bit more about how the technology works without getting into the, without necessarily getting into coding per se. And then finally, I want to leave you with how does a stack look like, right? So when we talk about, okay, where is NVIDIA and where is Microsoft and where is OpenAI playing, I want you to understand the different levels of the tech stack. So those are three broad areas we're going to talk about today, all right? And feel free to interrupt me if you guys have any questions in the interim. Yeah? All right. So first question, before we get into the topic, there was a recent research, this was with McKinsey, and they estimated what is the annual economic potential of Gen AI, okay? Any guesses, like any broad guesses in terms of how much do you think this is in terms of, say, USD? Yes, sir. 2 trillion? Did you say 2 trillion? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Any other guesses? Yes, sir. Okay. I'll take one more. Yes.
4 trillion.
Okay, not bad. Okay, so it is close. It's 2.6 trillion to 4.4 trillion annually. So definitely around the range. Ah, good. I was never the person who read pre-read, so I don't have a lot of expectations, but no, that's good. So this was quite revealing to me personally, right? If you think about it in terms of the value, it is as close to the GDP of UK in 2021. So that's a massive amount. Then the question is, where is all of this coming from, right? One, I think this is a very common fact. I'm sure most of you have read this in terms of how quickly it amassed users, right? So again, quick guesses. How long did it take ChatGPT to get to 1 million users? Yes, yes.
4 months.
4 months? 4 weeks? 1 week? Okay. 12 days? Oh, wow. Yes. 5 days? Brilliant. Hey, someone's leaked the question paper, JB. All right. Yes, 5 days. I think that was the shortest period of time. Any consumer-facing applications amassed 1 million users. I also have a figure here showing how long it took apps to hit 100 million monthly users. Again, one can argue, right, that 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, maybe the adoption of internet was not as big. That influenced it. Yes, all of that is true. But even with that, it's highly commendable, the rate at which users have adopted it, right? There was a dip sometime in June, but I also read research that it's going to come back up. So definitely a lot of user interest. I was in this panel discussion recently, JB, and someone called out, right? Like, why is there so much of interest? And someone from Microsoft actually said that this is the first time we've put a UI in front of AI, which probably explains why there's so much of consumer interest. All right, so with that, let's talk a bit about how does this look like, right? So one thing I wanted to share with you guys is, see, all of this seems like out there, but I've been dabbling with it, and I wanted to show you a couple of videos. This is...
most of the time, when you're assessing our options, confirmation...
This is the original video, right? Yeah, this is the original video. I do a lot of book reviews. So this is from one of my book reviews. And for anyone who knows me, I'm terrible at Hindi, right? I spent 2 years in Ahmedabad without knowing Hindi. I used to call my fiance to translate it. So I'm that bad in Hindi. But then I got AI to translate this for me, right?
अधिकांश समय जब आप हमारे विकल्पों की पुष्टिकरण पूर्वाग्रह का आकलन
It is probably not how colloquial people speak. I understand. That's what my husband told me as well. But and it's not also in my voice, right? So there is gaps which exist. But this is by a startup right here. I think this 23-year-old guy in Hyderabad kind of did this, right? So the reason I wanted to share this is it's happening right now all around us. It's not something which is happening out there, right? So with that, let's talk a bit about how does the technology in itself work. How many of you have heard of supervised models? Again, good. All right, awesome. All right. So and I can tell you, even without, knowing you folks, that every single one of you would have used applications of supervised models. Like when you look at Netflix and you look at recommendations, you are using algorithm, right? You're using algorithms to recommend this. So how do supervised models work, first of all, right? The underlying technology for supervised models is to label things. So for example, you are saying email, is it a spam or not? You're feeding data to say, is this spam or not? Does this look like spam? And then that application is spam filtering, right? Ads or users, whether they would click on it or not. That's used in online advertising. Say the image of a phone, like you can look at the defects in the image of a phone through visual inspection. Let's take restaurant reviews, right? What's your favorite restaurant over here? What's a famous restaurant around this place? I went to a dhaba close by and asked for curd rice, and I got sniggered at it. But yeah, so the thing is, if you're looking at restaurant reviews, right, think about it. If I were to send out information to the model saying that, I love the food over here, I love the aesthetics over here, I love the decor over here, that would count as positive sentiments, right? Versus the other one. So that kind of labeling which you do, the sentiment is sentiment analysis, right? That's another example. So any kind of supervised model works on labeling things, right? And then that's the kind of application you should use. Now, how does it work? You give label data, right? Where you're saying, okay, this is how the restaurant is, this is how the food is. It's great, it's not great, all of that, right? And then you train the model on it and run it. And that would say, I love chicken curry. Yes, that's positive. It's terrible ambiance. That's negative, right? So it kind of labels things. That's the basis of how a supervised model works. Now, how is it used in GenAI? Largely, underlying it is a similar technology, right? In GenAI specifically, it works on text generation, where you're predicting what is the next series of words. So for example, if you say, I love eating, it could be, I love eating my mom's cooking. I love eating samosas with sauce. I love eating out with my friends. You're basically predicting the next sequence of words which will follow that, right? So how do you understanding how means you're looking at the set of inputs which you're giving is this, right? So if you were to take the statement, my favorite food is bagel with cream cheese. What you're essentially doing is feeding the system with huge quantum of data, which will allow it to learn the sequence in which a human, it's mimicking human behavior, right? So mimicking the statement a human would make. So if it's my favorite food, the prediction would be, is bagel. My favorite food is bagel with cream, right? So essentially, think of it, I love this analogy, right? You can think of it as a rocket-fueled autocomplete. If you've used autocomplete in Google, for example, right? So the underlying crux of it, if you have to leave this class with one thing, is to understand that this is based on a large language model, and we'll talk a bit more about LLMs in the future. Large language model is trained on humongous amounts of data, right? Hundreds of billions of words. And that is what allows us to predict what is happening next, right? So then what do you feel could be a challenge in this? Like if I'm doing this with huge amounts of data, which I trained from Wikipedia and Reddit and all of the other internet sources, what do you think could be one or two challenges with this? Yes, sir. Yes. Absolutely, spot on. Yep. Yes, ma'am. Could you elaborate risks in terms of? Yeah, yeah. I used to think that is close to sci-fi, but now I'm not so sure anymore. Yeah, but that's a good point. Yep. Yes, Amrit.
Okay. So your data could be biased, and for example, in cultural biases or racist biases come in the data. So your model also becomes racist.
Absolutely. That diversity of data and the biases it introduces is a big topic. And I don't think there's an answer to that, Samveg, but be spot on that as well. Any other limited training data, as in we are not training with sufficient amount of data? Yeah, that is true. Again, what would be sufficient data in that sense? you're right in the sense that the quantum of data will continue to increase, right? It was trained with 175 billion parameters, and that will continue to increase. So
check.
yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yep. That's true. Yes, sir.
Where you store it and making sure that doesn't like corrupt or bit rot doesn't take place. So making sure that data stays safe and you can use it in the future as well.
Okay. You're talking about data storage, encryption. All right. Okay. Yes. Data is not representative. Yeah, not bad. I think you guys covered a lot of stuff, right? We spoke about compute. I think you all spoke. Yes.
One more new problem that's emerging is where has the data been sourced from? Like, is it copyrighted or not? Because it's become a huge issue now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like, so no, that's one way of thinking about it. Also, like, if it's proprietary data, anyways, and so if the model is just trained on that,
Hmm.
then there's a chance of that model just being thinking based on the data it has just been fed. So like, instead of just being biased, like very linear, thin. Like the thinking isn't broad enough. That way, like the model isn't.
Yeah. Yep. That's a good point. All right. All of the points which are called out, I think, are very relevant. We will try to touch upon all of that, right? Including the compute, the necessity for ethics and governance around it, the quantum of data. But most importantly, like a couple of you called out, right? How does it learn good from bad? How do you know, as a human, as a child, my 8-year-old probably knows that this is something I ought to do. This is something I don't need to do, right? How do you teach a system good from bad? So if you remember the sequence I called out, right? You're predicting next words. So think of it this way, right? My favorite time is so-and-so. My hair color is red, so-and-so, right? So you're generating text in a structured way that is grammatically accurate based on the data it is trained on. So you're training it on a bunch of data and it's generating this. Yeah, this looks good, right? But then the challenge is, it could also be this, right? Where you're saying, how do I make a bomb? How do I invest in stocks? What kind of stocks should I invest in? These are not necessarily things you would want to turn to AI for advice. These are not necessarily things you would want AI to advise you on as well, right? This was a challenge. So even, I think, as late as GPT-3, you could type in something like this and you could get an answer, right? Whether it's a right or wrong answer, no, but it was an answer nonetheless. That's not good, right? That's not what you would want AI to do. So how do you train a model to say that this is not okay, right? This is bad. That's where that's one, right? And then there's also hallucinatory stuff it can come up with. I remember I was asking ChatGPT for something. It gave me 30% statistics. 30% of the users do this. And I asked it, okay, where is this coming from? It's like, no, I don't have any research for it. I'm just telling you it's 30%, right? It could do that. It could hallucinate as well. So how do you make sure that it's aligned to human values, aligned to what you and I would do? That's where RLHF comes in. RLHF stands for Reinforcement Learning from Human Feedback. Very dense slide, but I'll kind of talk through this. So think about it this way, right? AI agent, and I'll show you an example. An AI agent, say it starts by acting randomly in an environment, okay? And video clips of the behavior of the agent is, say, shown to human. A human will decide which of the clip is closest to desired behavior. And then that goes back as feedback. And that's what you do the fine-tuning with, right? So over a period of time, this fine-tuning helps it to align closer to human values. Now, let me kind of show you an example of what OpenAI had shared around this. This is a paper which is, if you see this, right? This is just a flip. So this is a video which shows you, if it plays, then it plays, yeah. If you see this, right? For every flip, it's kind of expedited in speed, but it shows you the human labeling against each. For the flip, the human is kind of labeling it, saying left is better or right is better. For doing a backflip, what is better, right? So you're training. A human is basically providing feedback in order to train what good desired behavior looks like. All right. So And this is just for one backflip, right? So one backflip, I think they called out how it took them like 3 hours to do something like this with 900 individual bits of feedback, right? So it's not a simple process. It is definitely an intensive one. But what that allows us to do is, by this fine-tuning of the pre-trained data set, you get to have a fine-tuned models which is closer in alignment to human values. Now, again, it's not perfect. This is a work in progress, but this gets us closer. So if you see, GPT-4 will not provide you an answer to this question. If I were to ask, how do I make a bomb? It is not going to provide you answer to that question. Okay? So the next part, a couple of you asked, no, why is this happening now? So I'm going to throw that back to you, right? Why do you think there's this sudden focus in GPT? Why now? Why last year? Why not earlier, right? Any responses in terms of, any guesses in terms of why? There are answers over here as well, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yes.
Check. Prior to like GPT-2, perhaps there wasn't really much traction around LLMs in general because of the efficacy of like, the output. But once like, 3 came along and then 3.5 came along and then they released the API, then like you see everyone now has the potential to harness this incredible resource. And now like everyone's doing it and then it's such a huge hype.
Okay. The efficacy of how well it works. Okay. Yes, Samvik.
There's been improvement in like there's been an improvement in terms of the techniques that we have.
Yep.
So for example, deep learning came along, then Google published attention is all you need.
Yep.
And there were so many startups that were all working on it since the past 5 to 8 years. Yep. But now they've built like proper products that can be launched.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, yes. Easily accessible, and 3.5 is free. The APIs are accessible. The usage, you're talking about why the adoption. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So I was talking about it from why is there such a proliferance of AI and the focus on Gen AI right now? So yes, I think you all kind of touched upon a few key things, right? One, the data, as someone called out, the quantum of data, both structured and unstructured, is huge, right? Which we did not have earlier. The computational hardware, as Samvik called out, now we are able to use, or at least able to afford, the hardware which we didn't have earlier, and the improvements in technique. And we will talk about attention is all you need as well, which is one of those key, I would say, pivotal moments which kind of led to the transformers. So moving from there, let's go to, so we spoke about how does it work overall, right? Let's go to the underlying algorithm behind it and how does the transformer work. Quick question before we go there. How many parameters is GPT 3.5 trained on? Again, any guesses? 3.5 billion. Billion is correct. Yes. Awesome. Spot on. Yeah, it's 1 cent. You did? You have totally leaked the paper, JB.
Check. Hello.
200 times Wikipedia. All of Wikipedia was 3.5. Obviously, 4, we don't know.
4 is rumored to be multiple times Wikipedia, but again, it was not published. We don't know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yes, so it's huge, right? And someone kind of called out the training over a period of time. Yes, GPT-2 was, I think, way back in 2019. But you see, GPT 3.5 was released as 175 billion. GPT-4, I don't think they've disclosed what the training set was, but definitely much bigger than that, right? So it uses a technology called transformers. And then we'll talk about LLM. So let's understand a bit more about how transformers works. And LLMs work as well. Yeah. Okay, large language models. What do you think is the large language model? Any guesses? Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Check.
Yeah. Yeah, they are neural networks. They are trained on large corpus of data. Both of them are true. Yes, Ritu.
Based on what I've worked with LLMs, and
Nice.
in like the lamest of terms, right? It is just basically questions and answers and logic chains all put together and all interconnected in a huge, huge, huge network and map. And all of it just coming together and given to us in a language we can understand.
Perfect. Yeah, good. I'm pretty impressed with knowledge. Anyone else here?
Using NLP, and LLMs just sort of make that, they do all of those processes through one.
Brilliant. Give me a couple of examples
Of NLP functions. Translation is one of the things that I did.
Yeah.
So that, and also chatbots use a lot. Like where I worked a little bit on a chatbot, and we focused on developing LLM specifically for this chatbot.
Great. No, quite a smart class. Yes. Yes, sir. This is a neural network. Yes. It talks about it. This is a representation, a visual representation of how a large language model works. Sorry, was there a comment?
Yeah, so I had a question. So basically, is GPT-4 like how there are different kinds of neural network like MLP and then perceptron? So is it trained like this is the CNN, right? So like have they like used more neural networks to make it faster and like better?
Yeah. See, again, I think the way one of the research papers I remember reading is it's not like one single huge model which is doing everything, right? It's more like an ensemble, a bunch of small models which are kind of combined together in order to provide the output you need, which is trained on a huge corpus of data. So the corpus is increasing, but it is not necessarily one single algorithm or one single model which is providing this output. Yeah. So what I do want you to see is, yes, like I think a couple of you called that, it's massive amounts of data. It's across multiple layers, right? So I think GPT 3.5, I don't think what it was for 4 was disclosed, but GPT 3.5 has 176 billion parameters. This is spread across 96 layers, right? And we'll not get into what these layers are. I'm not going to bore you with that much of detail, but I think what you do need to know is the underlying architecture and the mechanism by which this works, right? So the transformer architecture is based on the paper, as someone called that, attention is all you need, right? If you are a nerd like me, I would highly recommend go and read the paper as well. It's very interesting. Nice, Rishi. Good job. Yeah. I would also recommend in case, I know it's not very easy to kind of read through the entire thing. There's this, I don't remember the name. I can send it over to you guys, but there's this tool which allows you to chat with the PDF. Okay, so you can actually chat with the paper. Chat PDF. Wow, smart. So yes, you can chat with the PDF and ask it questions to kind of give you a summary of the paper. What are the key takeaways? What is the further research? Things like that. Okay, but then let's kind of talk about this paper, right? The research paper, it talks about a new way to teach computers how to understand and generate language. So at a very basic level, if I have to do a 101, it has a transformer has 3 parts. Okay, it has an encoder, a decoder, and attention. Now, encoder, that part is the one which reads the input sentence and it creates a representation of it. Any quick answers? What's a representation of a language or text? It's in numbers, exactly. Why do we have it in numbers? And it's easier to store. Yes, it's more efficient. Yes, sir. Exactly. Yeah, it is more efficient. It's easier for systems, right? So it creates a set of numbers it understands. Now, the decoder, that's a part which takes the representation which is created by the encoder and generates the output sentence, right? And what is attention? What is the reason we have attention? So the way I kind of have it in my head is, if you think of it as a focus, right? It focuses on the important parts of the input sentence while generating the output sentence. And it does that by assigning weights or importance to each word in the sentence, right? So if you look at this statement, each text would have an ID, token ID. That's a representation as such, right? So numbers are used because they can be processed more efficiently. And the attention is basically like a spotlight, right? Which allows you to focus on what's the important parts of the sentence. So if you think about it, I love eating out will have more focus. I can say, I love eating out my friends. That's a sort of statement which would make sense, right? Statement which makes sense would ideally have with after out, right? So that is where the focus is. That's where the spotlight is. That's why that comes next. Okay, so it's as simple as that. Yeah, that's the underlying crux of it. Okay, now what's a multimodal model? Anyone? Okay. Yeah. I'm looking at you. Yeah. Different modes of data, right? It can work on text. It can work on visual images. So Google is working on this project called Gemini. It's a next multimodal model. It's a set of large language models. Like I was talking earlier, it's not one model. It's a set of multiple models. And it's supposed to perform tasks like chatbots, text summarization, like Shraddha called out, code, and generating new text, right? And it also includes features such as analyzing graphs, interpreting data, and performing other actions on the computer. This will compete directly with the multimodal model that OpenAI will come with. What's the expected size of this training set? We spoke about the previous one, that was 175 billion. What do you think is the size of this training set? No one wants to use a T word, huh? Yes? Yes, sir. Trillions, absolutely. It's at least 1 trillion parameters, yeah? And it's expected to use Google TPU AUs, AI chips. So if anyone's kind of following why NVIDIA, I could buy like one stock of NVIDIA, man. Like that's how expensive it is. So if you try to understand why is it increasing, and we'll talk a bit more about that, that's a reason why, right? You need this compute in order to train all of these models. All right, what is prompt engineering? I heard you all did a great course on this. What do you think is prompt engineering? Any answers? I'm not going to get into the details, but yes, yes.
Basically, how you tune or format your input to the chatbot and so that you get the proper thing that you need.
Yeah. How do you ask a question to a system itself? Yes. Yep. 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 Anything else? Yes. Right. So it's exactly that, where you are prompting or asking the right set of questions or asking it in the right format so as to get the answer which you need, right? Usually, one thing which works really well as a hack for me is if I were to explain it, either use a persona, right? Use a persona saying that I am an expert in this, and then you ask a question. So it tends to give you the answer accordingly. Or call out to which persona you're asking this for. Like you can say that, I want this. Explain to me like I'm a 12-year-old, for example, right? That would give you a better answer. So the reason I kind of talked about that is I want to leave you this section with 3 key things, right? One, ChatGPT is context aware. What does it mean when we say it's context aware? Yes. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a way. The context over here refers to historical context, right? Yes, Arushi. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm talking to you, Arushi, and I say, oh, it's so cold out there, I just came from outside, you know that I'm talking about it because I came from outside. You're associating it, right? So that's human nature. You associate it over a period of time. So ChatGPT does the same, right? So if I were to ask, who's the Prime Minister of India? And then say, what's his age? What's his age would be Narendra Modi's age, right? I don't need to, again, repeat what's the age of the Prime Minister of India. So it's very context aware. Second thing, which is yes.
A bit of a technical question. I know that ChatGPT, like specifically 3.5, it has like there's a limit on how much like context it can actually memorize.
Yes, you're right.
I've heard somewhere around the tune of 3,000 characters. I want to know, like, are you aware of any sort of like hard limit on like the amount of characters or information that of context it can actually parse?
Yeah, I think there is 3,000 tokens. I'm not sure of the exact number, but you're right. I think there is a limit to the amount of context it can hold within one session. And that's also limited by like whether you're using 3.5 or 4, right? What I've also seen is people, have you heard of LangChain? LangChain? No. LangChain is, you can use LangChain in order to create context-aware modules outside of GPT, right? So you can think of it as a layer above this, which will allow you to have larger context than what GPT allows. Yeah. All right. The second thing I want to call out is it also includes prompts which is invisible to us. Like we don't need to write it, but it's still invisible. What does it mean, right? So for example, tone. Whether, like, for example, complete the rhyme, roses are red, oceans are blue, you know that that's a happy tone. That's a tone which you'd use with a child. It's not going to suddenly shift to a tone which is opposite to it, right? So it'll follow the tone. It also has constraints, right? Like I called out earlier, if I were to say, oh, tell me about the stocks I should invest in over the next 6 months, it's not going to give me an answer. It has constraints in terms of what it can and cannot do. Yeah, so I just want to wrap this section with, while it does a lot of great things, it also has its own set of limitations. Okay. All right. What is the AI stack? What do you think are the components of a generative AI stack? Again, no wrong or right answers. Any guesses? Tell me one thing which you would find in the AI stack. Cloud. Yeah. Okay. The foundational models. Yes. What else? Yeah.
You'd also have the end interface that allows the users to interface directly with the models.
The application?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Yes, correct.
The data sets on which it was trained and the data sets is being gathered. Or what?
The data sets
that it was originally
which
trained on
trained?
Was trained on, and what it's like we are like adding as context and whatever it's like we are feeding data.
Okay, the data on which it is trained.
Like it's been trained and like in some cases still learning. That's what I was thinking.
Okay. All right. Yes. Broadly, there are 3. Yes. Again, that each of that can be broken down into multiple parts, of course. But broadly, yes, there are those high-level 3 areas. And we'll talk a bit more about those 3 very interesting pieces. All right, I think, yes, Karan.
Yeah, I think it comes under infrastructure, but I think even in each and every device, there's going to be an AI, a chip that basically enables AI. So firstly, like even how important is that in the long run?
Chip that enables AI. Give me an example.
A process. Yeah.
Okay, AI on the edge. Interesting. Okay. Let's kind of unpack where each of these fall, all right? Okay, first of all, part of what you guys said, right? It helps us understand where does NVIDIA play, where does GitHub play, where does OpenAI play, where do these applications play, right? All of these are very, very different across the stack. So anyone who's opened up the preview, you would have probably seen the stack. This is from A16Z. It talks about the different layers, right? Now, let's talk of examples in each. So yes, like PV called out, there are broadly 3 areas: apps, models, and infrastructure. But again, within each, you have different things, right? So let's talk about the first one, bottommost, starting at the bottom, right? Compute hardware. What is the hardware over there? You can actually read through it. It's quite evident, but that's the compute, right? So that's your CPUs. That's the NVIDIA, which you train on. That's Google. That's a compute hardware, which is at the bottom of the stack. That's the infra players. Okay. Now, above that is your cloud platform. Both of it is called as infrastructure because it's basically the mode in which it's consumed, right? Above that is the cloud hosting platforms, which expose the infra across the models. So like your Azure data stack, like GCP, AWS, all of that would probably fall under this stack. Now, the more interesting part is the models. Can anyone tell me about Llama? Have you all heard about Llama? Yes, Roshan. Google's? Metas? Metas. Awesome. All right.
No.
So when we talk about foundational models, right? That's the blue over here. Those are models that power AI products, which are available as either proprietary API. Someone spoke about why it's more proliferant now because it's available as APIs, right? Accessible. It's both open source as well as those which are require a hosting solution, right? So the type of text models, you have GPT-3, which we have spoken about a lot, Lambda and Llama. All the three are types of text models. And I think you all mentioned DALL-E, right? Most of you seem to have used DALL-E. Did you all hear the news that DALL-E is integrated into GPT? I think it came out this morning. Yeah, my daughter has this huge concern that, oh, it's just text, Amma. It doesn't make sense at all, right? Like, why is it not more colorful? So I'm so excited that it has images integrated now. Stable Diffusion, GPT-4 are all multimodal models, right? Now, can you tell me a challenge? If this is a foundational model and it is as awesome as we've been talking about it, what is the challenge in all of us having? Why should only Google have it? Why should only Meta have it? Why not every other company have it? Yes, Arindam. They don't have the resources. Could you elaborate resources? Massive amounts of data. Absolutely. Yes. Money. Absolutely. It's extremely expensive to have your own LLMs, right? Then second question is, should you have your own LLMs? Do everyone need their own LLMs, right? And we'll look at a few examples, right? Not every company needs their own set of LLMs, right? You can use open source available LLMs and you could build your applications over it. You could train LLMs with your proprietary data. So if you look at ChatGPT came up with the enterprise version where you could train it with your information and customize it for your applications within your enterprise itself, right? So I think that is happening. So let's talk about the last one here, applications. Can you give me an example of an application which you all have tried out? There's just so many which come out these days. Any application which you've tried out recently? Yes. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Notion. Yeah. Notion does have AI. Yes. Yes. Sorry, what was that? Yeah. Canva has auto. It has an auto write, right? I don't use Canva as much, but I think they have integrated that. Yeah. Yes. So applications basically integrate AI models into user-facing products. So someone called out here, right? They are the user interface applications, right? Now, what does the end user application need? Right? This example over here is an application called Amorai. It uses AI for relationship coaching. So what it basically does is it brings in the proprietary data plus the domain knowledge plus the AI, right? Which is offered, kind of combined together to provide the end-to-end application. Now, while you come across companies which do this, right? What do you think would be a challenge? Have you heard of this company called Lensa? Anyone heard of Lensa? Lensa, yeah? What do you think Lensa does? Wow, yeah, I didn't know about this at all. I was like, totally, what is Lensa? But yeah, exactly what you said, right? So apparently, it takes a picture and it could make you into an astronaut, or it could turn your picture into anything you want it to be. So Lensa, when it was launched, the story goes that the revenues went up like this, right? In a few months, it went up all the way up. And then after a few months, it just dropped back to its baseline levels. Why do you think that is? Oh, there was a control. Okay. Mm. Mm. Ah, okay. Got it. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that at all, but that's good to know, Arishi. So yes, maybe that is part of the reason as well. A large part of the reason which I read was also because it is more like a wrapper alone, right? So if you think about applications, if it's just a thin layer, if all it does is just adding one small functionality over an existing LLM, it's not sustainable, right? Like Arushi builds out an application, I can do exactly the same. So for any application to succeed, right, it is important that you're solving for the jobs to be done. You're going deeper in terms of how you're solving for the customer problems versus just providing what a LLM can provide, right? So that's something important to know when you think about applications. So next time when you come across a player in the AI market, exercise I want you guys to do is, where does it fall over here? Is it across, like OpenAI falls here, across, right? In the foundation models. Where does GitHub Copilot fall? Just think about where it falls in the AI stack. All right. I want to maybe talk about the way forward and then try to throw it open for questions. This was a paper which came out as recent as last week. It was by this professor called Ethan Mullick. And he showed, yeah, brilliant paper. I would highly recommend you read this, right? It's in a blog called One Thing or something like that, right? It's there in the reference section in case you want to find the link. So I think what he called out is he worked with BCG consultants, and he definitely proved that consultants who use GPT-4 finished 12.2% more tasks on average, and completed tasks 25% more quickly and produced 40% higher quality results than those without. And the low performers had the biggest gains, right? So he proved quantitatively that those who used AI were much better, faster than those who did not necessarily use AI. But there's a catch. If any of you have used, and it looks like most of you have, what has been your challenge in using any of these Gen AI tools? Like what are your top challenges? Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. My husband does this. I'm going to come to you. My husband does this. He's like, oh, I'm going to compete with you on LinkedIn posts, right? So he's like, okay, I'll ask GPT to write. It's terrible. Like you can get it in first draft, but you can read it and know that it's not a human who's written it, right? So absolutely spot on there. Yes. And it's so confident about it, right? I love the confidence with it. It's just like, no, this is right. Yeah, no, totally. Yes, Shraddha. Absolutely. I'm so glad that you guys are doing this in a very complimentary manner. JV, your class is really smart. Yeah.
Well, like I started using Bard a lot more because of factual information because it's more of a search tool. But whereas GPT, as mentioned here, was like helps if you're already got an idea and if you want some suggestions or creative takes or not, it kind of helps. Bard is more factually correct and just like if you want up to date information, Bard works better. Even being with its like Chat GPT-4 integration, that faded out after a point of time.
Yeah.
Bard is not as popular, but is much more accurate. And like even Google's now doing the search lab thing that's like you can see on the app. I'll just
It's interesting. So you spoke of Bard. Yes, you have a point, Ruth Parna? Compare, cross. You're like, are you saying the right things? Yeah. Yeah. I think what she raised is such an important point. It took me a lot of while to unlearn. So we are so used to interface where we're asking questions. We're used to treating it as Google, right? Where you're saying, I'm asking you a question, give me an answer. That's not how you talk to humans, right? We talk to humans as a conversation. So you're exactly spot on that. Yes. Yes. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's right. The way you engage with it, I think is hugely important. And yeah, I'm just curious because you spoke. Yes, you brought. Ah, yeah, compare. No, I like this. Yes.
The point I had would be about dependency, and when it is supposed to be used to complement human understanding, as someone said, very often we just automatically switch to it and ask it to generate an idea even. And the fact is, after you come out of your assignment paper, you're supposed to have human conversations face to face. You can't ask ChatGPT to talk for you, and you lack that.
Yeah. So bottom line is, how do you use it in a more complementary manner versus us?
And it shouldn't be something you revert to every time you have to rack your mind.
Yeah, yeah. Curious about like what else you'll use. I think I heard Bard, I heard GPT. What else you'll use? Yes.
The last common one I use is crayon.ai. It's very good for image generation. It's very, very
okay. Very, very interesting. Yes, Karan. Very nice. I haven't used that one, so I should spell it out for me. Okay. Okay. Does it work well with like a particular prompt? Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. So what I've kind of realized is, like the gentleman here called out, right? Asking, it's not a 1 or 0, right? None of life's problems are 1 or 0. You can't just say, okay, I'm giving it to you, do this and give it to me, right? It does work, it'll give you something, but it's not necessarily stuff you want to use. Like Beautiful.ai, it has a like a $6 monthly fee, right? And it does beautiful text. But it has 2 modes, right? One where you can work along with the AI, one where you can ask the AI. You can just say, I have a prompt, create a PPT on generative AI 101. I actually asked it, right? Like, tell me a PPT on 101. Tell me what's under the hood. It created a presentation which GB wouldn't have allowed me to bring in, right? It's just horrendous, right? So as in, it has the facts, but it isn't really in the format which you would like to explain. So, but then the way I kind of went back and did it is, I don't know whether you'll use, I use perplexity.ai. I find it better than the others. Yes? Oh, really? Wow. Yeah. No, it's very surprising the extent to which you're leveraging it for doing your work at school. I'm quite impressed with that, right? But yes, the way I kind of used it is to look at Perplexity, get that initial information about what I was researching for, and then use it to build the presentation, right? So I think the crux is to know when to use it and how do you work with it collaboratively. So like, I think one of the questions I get is, oh, will I be replaced, right? So if and when you get to the corporate world, right, I think one of the core human skills is to ask critical questions. So if someone tells you, oh, I want to go from A to B, do I build a bridge? Do I swim across? There are multiple ways to cross a river. So it's not to ask, how do I build a better, faster boat, but to say, what's the best way to cross a river? And that's where human intelligence comes in. So the part I wanted to leave you with is exactly this, right? The part in red over here calls out that those who used AI for tasks that it wasn't good at were more likely to make mistakes. So trusting AI where it shouldn't. So the key is to know when you need to use it and how do you use it, right? You don't necessarily give it all away, but use it in a way which allows you to be better. I think that's what I had as part of the session today. We covered a lot of ground in terms of understanding how GenAI works. We spoke about transformers, we spoke about the attention mechanism, and it kind of wraps it up with the last section on the tech stack, right? What I did want to leave you with, and I think you guys are already there, right? Use it in a complementary manner, right? I think that's the basis crux of it. Use it in a way which allows you to write a better paper versus asking it to write a paper in itself. But I think I'm at time, JB, I'm going to pause here. I'd love to see if there are any other questions, anything else I can answer. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
We're trying for that.
Absolutely.
But there are many questions.
Oh, nice. He won't.
Right now, not projecting. Sorry, just give us a couple minutes.
While he kind of figures that out. Yeah. I'm just curious, right? Like, because you all seem to know more tools over here than I do, or at least I use. So any favorite tools which you actually have seen value from? Yes, Sakshan. Dome.
Oh, Dome
Okay.
is brilliant.
It is for what? Ah, okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it a free or is it a paid one? Oh, Tome, T-O-M-E. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Any other recommendations, guys, which you all use often of tools? No? Yes. Mm-hmm. Ah, I think by Quora, right? Yeah. Hmm. Mm. Apart from nudging, does it give you more information that allows you? No? Oh, okay. Uh-huh. It's just being an irritating person, no? Okay. Okay.
Hello. Check.
Yeah. I'll come to you in a minute. I think he had a point as well.
And this is the most amazing way that I've seen explained how a transformer really works. It's from a, okay, because it's a site. So this is a visual story, okay, and it's from the Financial Times. And I'm not going to go through all of it. I'll later on send the link, but this is paywalled, so I don't know. I'm not aware whether Ashoka has access to Financial Times or not. Lovely. Okay, so I'm only going to introduce it to you rather than take you through all of it. Okay, but for people who want to understand the transformer, so I'm not going to read all of it, but it goes to a lot of what you said, Ranjani. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
This is why-
I did send it around in the group, but,
okay, maybe I missed it.
the
Yeah.
traffic in the group is very
It's
high.
huge. I know.
Huh? Yeah, and the paywall problem. I wrote there that there's a paywall here. So, if you think of this thing called we go to work by train, like it was you had a sentence there, something.
We love to eat out much.
Yeah, so think of the same sentence. So LLMs, as she said, must first translate words into a language they understand. Okay. And here what they do is that they kind of break them down into what are called tokens, which some of you know about. Sometimes tokens are full words, but sometimes a word can be multiple tokens. And, the unit for large language models, as we know, is kind of tokens rather than words. Okay. So they break it down into tokens. And, basically what they try to do is that they figure out what, from that entire data set, what are the words which are nearby to those tokens. Okay. So you can see there are a list of words which are kind of near, okay, to that.
When it says near, it means which comes in the same context, like how a
same
human would
context.
use.
And actually, you have to think spatially here, literally. Think of it like a big, massive dimensional word cloud. Okay, which, certain words being closer in meaning to each other. And again, as I said, I'm not going to go through everything here because that will then eat up a lot of time. Okay, and so then we end up with this huge set of words which are found alongside work. So things like, like what you see in orange here are the words which amongst that massive word cloud are close to work. The things you see in blue here don't have any relation, okay, to work. Work polka, work dove. I mean, there's no relation. So these guys kind of try to find relations, and based on those relations, they assign numbers, probability. What word would be next to each word? So something has a 0.08 probability, something has a 0.15 probability, etc. And therefore, what happens is,
it's called a word embedding, by the way. Like,
yeah, exactly. So a word embedding, as she rightly said, can have hundreds of values. And so what happens is that work becomes something which looks like this. This is the visual representation of the word work. Okay, and it has 0 to 1 possibility, okay, of other words alongside it. And what you'll see here is, see how sea and ocean look similar. Okay, see visually, they look similar. Or soccer and football look similar. I and we look similar. Okay, this is kind of is what really happens in the innards of the large language model, and therefore you can kind of cluster these words, and somewhere along this comes the concept of vectors. Okay, and vector space, which we will not probably get into.
And when we say the distance between words, it's basically think of it as words which will come together, like spatially, right?
Yeah. So to take off from what she said, the pronouns are the maroon cluster. Okay, and transportation is the blue cluster. Okay, and so we're literally like clustering. Okay, somewhere in between. So this kind of goes on. Okay, and so now this was what was happening, frankly, before the attention paper. Okay, this is the pre-attention is all you need kind of the paper that came out, and it still worked. Large language models worked even before.
We've tried like Google.
BERT, and there were a few others. They worked, but they took huge, even more compute power, more time, more money, etc. Then came this just 11-page research paper, okay, which kind of then started doing this in a slightly different way, which and this is what she was talking about. That word there was with, right? Here the word is no, and it's all about so self-attention looks at each token and decides which others are most important to understand its meaning, and so it kind of derives the and someone talked about recurrent neural networks. derives the kind of relationships between them. It sees the full sentence. It doesn't do it word by word by word. The basic difference in attention and sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, that's what, if you just scroll up, right, for a minute. So I think that's the point, right? In the previous one, like in RNM, it does it sequentially, right?
Yeah,
Versus this, where it does it for the entire sentence at the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. And, so if you tweak so interest is like the main word here. I mean, everything is kind of linked to that. But if you change the word interest, okay, in another way, it doesn't just look at interest. It looks at the association, the entire sentence. And look, I know it's kind of a little too much to kind of say here, but this goes on. And so I'm going to send this to you, Priyank. Okay, and this visually will beautifully explain, and in a very simple way, the whole attention transformer model, etc., etc. So I just wanted to bring it.
Yeah, no, this is a great example. Thanks for sharing that. Right, I think, yes. Yes, sir. 5, 10 minutes? Yes, Aman. Yeah. First of all, there are two very strong views, right? Now, where I stand, honestly, I'm not the expert in either, right? So I am looking at facts from both the ends. So I don't have a very strong opinion because I don't know enough of both ends, right? But having said that, there's views from both ends, and I'll maybe talk a bit about that, right? One, like, if you hear Sam Altman's any kind of Q&A he's on, right? His primary point is, see, this is not an experiment I can sit and do in silos. Like, I can't sit and kind of build this out and iterate this and get to a point where it's perfect and then release into the world. His point is, it will be incomplete, it will have errors, but I'm doing this in public. So I'm building it in public. That's one. The other thing he calls out is when we talk about human value alignment. How are we aligned? Whose values are we aligning? Are we, as humans, have one value? We don't have one value, right? Like, maybe I value something else, you value something else. So that alignment to values in itself is a very nebulous concept right now. And I know what you're calling out, maybe there are strong opinions from what one person has versus what Sam has, but that's his perspective, right? So that's like one point of view. Now, again, in terms of go-to-market as well, right? If you see Llama, it was open sourced. It's very different from the other model, which has been go-to-market in a very closed manner in that sense, right? So I think right now they're playing in two different ways. Both have its own pros and cons, is all I would say, right? Aman, I'm not sure if there is one way which is the right way or the other way which is wrong. From his perspective, Sam Altman's perspective, I think the way he is talking about alignment, if you read any of OpenAI's papers, he's very clear about how he's thinking about alignment as a strategy, right? So I can't necessarily comment on whether it's right or wrong. It's just two different perspectives is all I would say. Yes, Pete. Yeah, how do we?
Hello.
Elaborate on your understanding of the black box problem.
How they chanced upon a particular thought. Because of the self-awareness, they'd be able to tell you, okay, I thought of this and this and this and this and this, and then you finally understand why they came to the conclusion that they came to.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the same can't be said of like any of these AI models, right? And there's increasing interest within a lot of the AI research community regarding implementing a lot of AI agents into more policy-driven implementations. But if you were to do that, there will be this expectation from like a rights perspective and a transparency perspective to get a sort of, I guess the technical term is ratiocination for any particular conclusion like an AI agent would come to. Unfortunately, because of the way algorithms work, there is no currently, there's no feasible way for us to figure out, okay, the agent did this, and this. That's why it came to this particular conclusion, which is what is like, sort of preventing a lot of like, a lot of the applications that could potentially be used in. So how would we get around that?
That's actually a very profound question. I'd love to hear your thoughts also on that, GB. But I'll kind of attempt it, PV, right? So again, see, I'm not the expert again, but here's my take to it, right? Yes, explainability is a huge problem. Like, forget about now, right? Even in the past, even like, for example, we used to build propensity models, right? Where you're saying, oh, you know what? These are leads which are more likely to buy, upsell, cross-sell. Go and talk to the sales and give them a list. The first thing they're going to say is, no, this doesn't look like they'll buy. Why are you telling me they will buy? Explain what, right? And we had to kind of explain what are the features which is driving that, right? We had to explain. That's a very, very common problem. So I think that will continue to exist. Right now, like you rightly called out, there are areas where that doesn't exist, right? Personally, I would say that it still doesn't negate the value which AI can add in a bunch of use cases. I was speaking to the startup founder. He was talking about how in healthcare, a large quantum of work which a doctor does is paperwork, right? And a lot of times, it's so intensive that he doesn't necessarily pay attention to the extent he should. And the same thing from the patient's perspective. Like if I get a report, I'm not the doctor. I don't know what it should be saying or shouldn't be saying. So he's building out software which does anomaly detection, which tells you ahead of time that you are on the path to get into this disease, right? Now, those are essentially good problems to solve. The bottom line is I would still use it with a human in the loop, right? While it does provide what it does provide, you still need a human to kind of validate better to say, yes, is this something I want to use? Is this something I shouldn't use? So yeah, how do I get around it? I would probably still use it in specific use cases while I still have a domain expert or a human taking the decisions, not necessarily AI taking those last mile decisions.
So, I will have to go.
But interesting problem.
And maybe we can drag it into the next session. But I just wanted to kind of move on, for a break and then come back. So thank you so very much, Ranjini.
I had so much of fun. Thanks a lot, team.
Amazing. I was amazed both by the way you simplified and took this very complex thing, and I must admit by how much you guys know.
Yeah, no.
So I'm actually very scared of that ethics session next week. Okay, super scared of it. Okay, I've just done a little master's in that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for that little picture here. In generative AI, 100 million people there have been 100 million POCs already, maybe 200 million, 300 million. It's kind of moved away from the POC stage. And there are use cases available even in generative AI in enterprises where you can get almost instant ROI. Any idea what those use cases could be? Customer support is the big one. Why? How? And replace all the humans there. Okay, good one. Yeah. For low involvement. Okay. Anything else? Immediate use of generative AI in enterprise. Absolutely, at scale. In fact, contact centers is very interesting. And what I believe is that stage one, it'll help make the human contact agent work better. Stage two, some part of the work will be done by the human and some part of the work will be done entirely by the AI. Stage three, let's not get into that. Okay, but there are many such examples And we'll talk about a few of those where, it'll get into an immediate, and, across domains. We will definitely talk about domains, which domains are the ones which are where generative AI is going to, and generative AI plus AI in that sense is going to have a greater impact. Some of the domains which will have a lesser impact. But even when we get to the conversation, can you guess which domain you think will be the most susceptible? One or two domains. Contact centers is one, okay? Domain, so I mean like manufacturing, I mean like, whatever, auto, yeah. High impact, right? You're right. Same, marketing and sales. Anything else? Not that high, somewhere in the middle. But the admin part of HR, yes. R&D, actually both. Okay, actually both. Lowest, sorry, let's move the script. Lowest. Yep. Agriculture, construction. Manufacturing, not that low. No, law is like the lawyers are scared for a change. Okay. But the lawyers will find a way. Okay. Military, yeah. Well, unless you talk about lethal autonomous weapons and all those killer drone swarms. Gen AI lesson. Yeah, you're right. Therapy, yeah, therapy. Huh? It's happening, yeah. But generative AI probably could do it better. Probably. So the menial stuff. In fact, there are jokes going around about software engineers becoming farmers now. Okay. And basically tech and software is another high impact area. I really need to go fast. So I'm going to, this is another way to show it. So I'm not going to spend time showing this. Law, since someone talked of law, and this is from other company, I kind of sometimes work with as an advisor, as an advisory board called Findability Sciences. This is another one. See, law, in fact, is going to be one of the most effective. We talked about law, so I just brought this up. All of these things that law firms do actually can be augmented and some of it replaced by generative AI. Untangle.com is one of the, anyone knows untangle.com or detangle.com? Anyone has seen detangle? It's a generative AI tool. Exactly, it translates them into English. So you understand what is written there. And that's where lawyers have a problem now. Okay, so detangle, yeah? Do not pay, yeah, do not pay, absolutely. I was going to say that, you anticipated me. Do not pay is a robo-lawyer. Okay, another reason why lawyers have a problem. Just the words itself are provocative enough. Harvey is something which is getting a lot of attention. It's a British startup. It signed up with PwC, it signed up with another big four and one of the Bain or BCGs. Basically, Harvey helps auditors, consultants, lawyers in these firms become better at their jobs. Most of the times in these firms, you don't know where all the information resides. And Harvey kind of puts it all together and kind of even the information within it, you can query it, etc., etc. And a bunch of these things will actually become much easier. And as I said, this is my last slide, last couple slides, that the business cases are limited only by our imagination. Today, we don't even know some of the business cases. One of my favorite, I don't know, maybe I've said it in class, if so, it's a repetition. Remember I showed you the protein in the thing? With discriminative AI or predictive AI or big AI, you could actually, predict how a protein will fold. With generative AI, you can create new proteins. Actually, new proteins which biology hasn't created. And then using AI, test out those proteins. Okay, and kind of, so, and this, by the way, is a super hot area. One of the first disruptive use cases of generative AI. And actually a bunch of biotech firms, not in India, but in the US, UK, are kind of doing that. So I'm not going to go through these. I'm going to leave them for you. But I just thought I'll also provide a little bit of an Indian context. I've been around with many Indian companies, asking them what they are doing in generative AI. Many of them are still trying to figure out what it is. But beyond that, lot of Indian companies, and the reason I'm saying this is that these would potentially be opportunities for you, as you get into some of these companies. A lot of them are setting up what are called COEs, another corporate jargon after POC, Center of Excellences. Okay, so they're saying, okay, you know what, young people, let me just put them together and kind of put them in a center of excellence around generative AI. Now, what can you do? All these tools, what can you do? And I think one of the, and that's what Puneet that you met from PwC actually created a COE within PwC. And that kind of became a global thing. And so I think this is a great way for many of you to be actually working in large companies, but doing this cool stuff and utilizing the power of this large company. So a COE basically would say, okay, fine, there are all of these tools, some of these which we talked about today, how it can help the Mahindra Group, okay, or Unilever, or whatever. And they're the crack teams, COE stuff, whether in large companies or GCC. So this was just a bit of a preamble, okay, that I wanted to put out there. And basically the 5 things, it's limited by its imagination, sometimes assistive, sometimes disruptive. AI plus Gen AI. Okay, it's not just only AI value initially at the bottom of the stack, but will go upwards. So, those are some of the things which we wanted to remember in the enterprise use case stuff. So with that, I will call Sudhir, who has first driven for 2 hours in Bangalore and then 4 hours in the flight, and then 3 hours or 2 hours to come here. So thank you very much, Sudhir. Let's kind of just set this up. Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful you're here. Let me just set this up and open up something.
I want to ask folks, once you understood how ChatGPT works, was anyone depressed? No? Everything is so predictable, right? You type a question, you get an answer. When I first played around with it, and I asked someone in the office, how does this actually work? This answer was, it's just trying to give form a string of words which will please you, make you happy, right? That's what it's really trying to do. And I figured all human knowledge for all these years has just been compressed into software, which you ask a question, it gives the answer which you like. How predictable can humans be? So it took me some time to get over that. So it's.
Before we start, anything else you might want to share, Sudhir?
Straight. I just had that.
Whether ours or AI's, right? Absolutely. Okay, lovely. So Sudhir, you have been in India so many years, but now you have a global role and you're kind of seeing how one, ThoughtWorks has been involved globally in AI, generative AI. But I don't want to start with AI, generative AI. Yeah. Over the past 25, 30 years, you've seen multiple new and newer technologies come in. Web3, blockchain, ABCD, IoT. Do you think this is one more or this is different?
Is everyone here born in this century? Okay. So we've been around for a long time. We've been working.
I was in last century and not before.
You were born, yeah, okay. So yes, I think all of us have seen multiple, I don't know if you want to use the word hype cycle. I think that's what we were speaking about. And it's very tough to predict what's going to stick, what's not going to stick. People know Bill Gates famously missed the whole internet. He just thought it wasn't ready. It's 5 years later, and they just missed that whole wave, I think, for a period of time. So I wouldn't hazard a risk by saying it's hype. But I think to the point which you mentioned earlier, I think this will have a massive impact. The duration is unknown. The time duration is unknown. The pace is unknown. I think as the next set of chips come out next year, it may get accelerated, or it may take 10 years. And again, this is a famous statement in technology, right? Nothing happens for years, and then years happen in weeks. Most likely, something like that, I think, is going to happen. It's been compared to when internet started. That took a long time to catch on, but it's the iPhone moment, I think, for AI. So I would say it's a big leap for AI, the Gen AI movement, because AI has been around since the 50s. It's never looked upon kindly, especially by the enterprises. So it's a use case, it's something lying there in the corner. I think Gen AI has got people looking at it, I think, quite carefully right now. So I think ChatGPT, well, it's been a year now since the hype started in November. So it'll take some more time, but I think it's here to stay. But the invisible stuff is going to be interesting. I don't know if it's going to be in plain sight or is it going to be hidden behind a lot of stuff we really end up doing, which actually to me is quite scary because I think you'll get influenced. I know you folks are doing ethics next week, but that'll lead to very interesting discussions, I'm sure.
I mean, on the same thing, Sudhir, I may let on to the class. I've heard you talk about literally 15-year cycle, right, in technology. And one of the things you told me was that the next 15-year cycle actually belongs to generative AI and AI. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I started working in 94, and the Indian IT services industry just took off, I think, at that period of time. And this is I'm all talking from an India context, not a global context. So that's where the Indian IT services industry really started off. I actually ended up in a product company without realizing that, a product startup at that point of time. But it was 15 years, which was just the Indian IT industry. And then 2008-9 is when the startup boom really started in India. So if you were lucky at that point of time, you would be in a Flipkart or in Amazon or someplace. And then you would have ridden that wave, I think, for 15 years. And I was telling Jaspreet, I think that's a solved problem right now. People know how to scale. The consumer internet era is almost over. It's going to continue, obviously, but the excitement is gone. And I think my view is the next 15 years is all going to be around startups happening around AI and around Gen AI. And I don't think any of us can escape it. So I think people like us need to learn it. I keep telling my kids it's going to be like Excel. So, like in my work life, I couldn't survive without knowing Excel, and that was true for any industry you worked in. I think AI is going to get embedded that way into everything we do in the next 15 years. So it's a massive, massive, massive opportunity, and I think that's going to be a very exciting next 15 years. I think.
And the reason I wanted to bring this up, guys, is that look, as Sudhir said, now if this class was happening 15 years back, okay, I mean, we would all be talking about how if you want to get rich and famous in the next decade or so, the thing to do is the consumer internet. And that's how, Binny Bansal or whatever, all the, what other Bansal was it?
Sachin Bansal.
Binny Bansals of world, Mukesh Bansals, all of those
IT
guys.
Delhi Mafia.
Yeah, the IT Delhi Mafia, our friend, Paytm friend, Vijay, all of them actually rode that wave. Okay, and before that was the services wave. I remember in the services wave, I was not a part of it, but people used to get a Mercedes every year when they used to, then they wrote the consumer internet. Now here, you're so fortunate in that sense and so lucky that you're right at the cusp of the next 15-year wave. And that's where actually Ashoka and Priyank's foresight in terms of having this kind of a class here and we talking about it, because now is the time to ride this wave.
Yeah, can I add just one scary part to that, right?
Yeah.
Because if you look at these 15-year cycles, I also got lucky, got into software without knowing what I was getting. But in the next few years, everyone was getting into software. It was a known industry. To your point, the services industry did fantastic at that point of time. And if you, I guess, ask your parents, India at that time, corporate jobs weren't looked at as something to get into. To get a government job, that was the overall thing, get into IS or go abroad. And I think the IT services really changed that, right? I mean, corporate governance and what you did, you can actually run a business in India quite honestly. That was a big change. And then obviously the internet boom happened. With AI, the world is going to change, right? My previous point, it's going to change. There's this big discussion which is happening everywhere. What's going to happen to jobs, right? So blue collar jobs are hit. Now the white collar jobs are going to be hit. So with whatever you learn, there's no guarantee that these skills are going to help you get a job in the next 5 years. You might get a job tomorrow, right now with these skills, but everything is changing rapidly. So in fact, all the industries which are getting impacted, we've been discussing, writing software might be the biggest industry which gets impacted with Copilot and stuff happen. And your best bet really is to go and create an industry on your own right now. And I think you have that opportunity in India right now, which I don't think existed maybe 25 years back. I mean, it did for a few people, but now I think that can happen across the.
A couple of questions. You want to go first? Yeah. That's the cynical Sudhir, by the way.
No, but that's. I wish I knew. No, but there are two ways to look at it, right? I mean, what are you telling me something? This Harvard 99-year course or something? You go back every year and learn again. So you can come back every year to Ashoka and learn. I think that's going to be something which will happen. But if you look at, Jaspreet and I were discussing this on the way here, I think today Chat GPT with a few clever prompts can generate an article and you won't know whether Jaspreet wrote it or did someone else write right now. So it's going to really create a level playing field, I think, on a lot of this stuff, right? Ken Beck, who is a close friend of ThoughtWorks, those in the software industry may know him. He actually tweeted a few months back. So he played around with ChatGPT, and then he said, he tweeted, and you can look up his tweet. I don't remember the exact words, but he said, the value of 90% of my skills have dropped to $0. But the value of the remaining 10% has gone up 1000x. Now the trick is, what is that 90% and what is that 10%? And then he's put a blog on that's something we need to discover. So it's going to be a level playing field. I think a lot of stuff which everyone does, that's going to be in the 90%. But you'll have to build a specialization, I think, on top of it. And I think those are skills, I think, which you'll have to build over a period of time. I I don't know if it's going to last 15 years, but I definitely think if you see the life cycle of a company and how much time it takes, especially for startups, right? It goes through that whole cycle, and it doesn't mean companies will die down. Like Infosys and started in 92 or even before that, it's still on, right? Microsoft is still on. The only company which I think has been relevant in every decade in the last 50 years, which is just absolutely incredible. 80s, 90s to they've got berated or whatever, they've always stayed relevant over a period of time. I think all these e-com startups, they will remain. It's just an opportunity which AI is now presenting for the next generation of startups right now. And that is it's a great spot to be in right now. You can harness that. Yeah.
Because it's very difficult to keep track of thousands of AI tools coming every day, right? And the most popular ones thrive and the rest die down. So is AI really beneficial for every little startup that is
That's true for every
Nothing to do with AI.
It's always been the case.
The guy called Charles Darwin way back.
Yeah, it's what Joseph Trumper or someone who says it's that's how capitalism works. I think companies, the ones who do well, and there's no formula for doing well. So you have to just keep at it, keep defining your idea, have the belief, and then hopefully it'll work. Have the right back.
So we're still at question 1 of the 4 or 5 things I want to ask.
There's another question there.
Yeah. Okay. So let that be the last one, if that's okay on this one, and we can move to the next question, if that's okay.
So I think all of us have heard about how AI is not necessarily going to like take away your job, but also create new ones. So I just want some, if I could get some more information on specifically what kind of jobs do we expect that are going to emerge. And also, if you don't have a background in, in CS or in AI, like you don't have a degree in or a master's in it, how can you, I don't know, either curate or be a part of a job that is, that's very AI focused and integrates that? Because I don't think everyone can a master's in AI or even a bunch of courses in AI. It's a lot of time.
Most likely, you don't need that. So, I've got a chemical engineering background, so I keep joking. The only thing.
So am I, by the way. I'm a chemical engineer.
So the only thing I learned 4 years in college was don't get into chemical, find a job elsewhere. So that was my, but that was a learning. So in college, you learn a lot of different things, right? But to your specific question, you don't know. And I was telling Jaspreet, both of us will not know. We just grew up in a very different business environment. We can get fascinated by this. I can try and apply this into my work today. But I think the new jobs will come from, some of you will create those industries. And if you go and look at all the people who have done great startups, they're all college dropouts. Not encouraging anyone to drop out of college. But what I'm saying, education is you learn a lot of things, but don't get too first on that skill or the discipline which you're doing. You get a lot of other things from college, which are, I think, a lot more valuable. So the connections, the network, just the way you learn, right? I mean, I think that's what I learned in college, how you can, in 6 hours, you can prepare enough to go and give an exam, right? And those were, I think, very valuable skills can be used later. But if I knew those industries, I would be betting and making a lot of money.
So just before I move to the question, I was listening to this recent Lex Fridman podcast with Yuval Noah Harari, and just to answer something which he said, and he said, you know what, there's the first generation who's graduating, which is you, which doesn't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. No one can predict the future, but at least in our time, we knew there would be a family. Okay, there would be a home. Okay, we don't know. And so he says, my advice is, and I know we're kind of moving away from enterprise AI. Okay?
But I was thinking this is so relevant because this will impact how corporates need to think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he was saying, so look, we were taught, and that's my generation, Yuval's generation, is that, you build a career like you build a house with a deep foundation, okay, strong walls, so that any storm comes, etc., your career, your stuff is there. He says, now you need to have a backpack and a tent. Okay, so basically, because everything, you just need to figure out, okay, stuff is changing. Okay, I put my tent there and I have a backpack. So if that gives you, if that gives you a little bit of idea of,
No, it's I keep. I've had a very weird IT career. My dad worked in one place. He was a professor in IIT, Roorkee, and I've just worked in 2 places in the last 30 years. But I'm sure all of you will be working in multiple places with your backpacks and your tents.
Okay, so let's kind of drag the conversation a little bit into enterprise, and we'll move away. If you guys think this is what we want to talk about, that's what we'll talk about.
Just can I just on that particular philosophical, you just reminded me of that podcast. It's very interesting if you haven't heard it. But what will be? I think TV was mentioning around philosophy and other things. So we're working in this, what do you call this, post-truth era? Is that the era of multiple truths? I think right now, and now some of this will be what AI generated, and as a corporate, that becomes very interesting because the information which you're dealing with, you never know what's right, what's wrong. And that I think is going to be that's a massive challenge which today I think corporates are facing. And then how do you deal with what's right, what's wrong? What product do you like? I mean, I just can't imagine that world when for the recommendation engine there and right or wrong, whether it's synthetic data which has or bots which are putting all this information there. So I just think we're philosophically entering an era where the fundamentals of all of this will change, but at the same time, I think we see some sciences, philosophy, ethics, that might just end up being pretty much mainstream.
And that's great for a university like Ashoka.
Yeah.
It's that Medici effect that she was talking about. So going to non-Medici things. Okay, we've obviously seen a lot of excitement around the consumer part of generative AI. ChatGPT, DALI, etc., etc. But we all know that sometimes the real money or the real track, for a technology is what happens on the enterprise side. And so I thought, maybe we talk a little bit about that. And what I would love to hear, Sudhir, is that, since you're working on tens of these use cases across industries, across the world, where do you see some of these generative AI applications, use cases in certain different industries?
So one, it's pretty broad-based, right? Almost every industry is
a GPT.
Yeah, it's a GPT. Yeah. And right now, if I just use, it's limited by, I think, the imagination of the business users. We're actually working overall. So, and we can try some of those things right now. So we spoke about customer support, but can anyone build on that? How will that actually look like, or how should that look like right now? But that you're still limited by what we have and how do you automate that, right? So I'm sure all of you use different food apps, right? So can they predict that you're going to call them? Can they get to that level of sophistication with AI, for instance? Or if you call them, can they predict what will your complaint be at that point of time? And that's the kind of thinking which some of the customers we are speaking to, that's the intelligence you want to build in right now. And so one of my questions was, at times you may not be able to explain why that is happening. And that to me is the real power. You talk about the Lee Sedol, the Go game. That guy retired after he lost to AlphaGo, right? And no one could explain how it learned and beat it. That to me is the real power of AI. And for me, I think it's for us as humans getting very comfortable with that notion that we will not understand. And to dive into, and it's one debate which Jaspreet and I keep having, Eastern versus Western philosophy, right? I think Eastern philosophy is very go by your experience. So we've been doing yoga for ages, but now the West is explaining yoga, so everyone's excited. This hormone gets released, this happens, that happens. But I think for years, people have been going on that experience right now in this part of the world, at least. And I think that's going to be the magic with AI, with all the, it's laced with danger around that. So that's something which needs to be worked through. But I could think of so many cases, if you think of conventionally how things actually work, where AI can add value. Or I can give an example of this class, this composition. Assuming all your profiles are available, what's the right composition which makes learning in the class the most effective? So some of our clients have actually asked us that. If I want to form a team which is going to go and service a client, what are the personalities I need? This is what the client team has. This is the problem. which group of, let's say in this case, which group of thought workers will work extremely well to deliver what the client needs, but people can actually learn as they go along. Now, these today we have teams which actually go and staff, right? And they have some of this intelligence, but our belief is with AI, it will be able to, go in a level deeper around some of these things. So, but the questions you were asking, those are the top fields we're seeing now. So it's customer support in terms of what can you do, and you can be very innovative with this multimodal thing. To be very, very innovative. There's obviously sales and marketing. Marketing is a big one right now. So, and what do you think the challenge is with using Gen AI with marketing right now? Any guesses? Yeah. What's right? Okay, that can be addressed, but that's fair.
I think, yeah. No, I think you were saying something, right? Yeah, and then we can move to your end.
Okay, can you play around with that a bit? So that's obviously spam for you. What does it mean for a corporate? But even before that, anything before that? Which is the biggest problem we've heard people talk about. So I'll go here and come back. Yep. Yeah. So how do you integrate the whole? Yeah, that's still solvable. But okay. Yeah, so I think parts of it, I think a biggest challenge, right, whether on all generative outputs, is organizations are not ready to process that right now. So we got marketing folks saying earlier, I worked with an agency, we got 3 designs after 3 weeks. And now, within a day, we get 3,000. You can just choose a number. So you're spoiled for choice, really, right now. And that's putting a lot of pressure on corporates, I think so. So it's for marketing. Software is another big field which is going to get disrupted. And now we believe as the software output becomes faster, organizations are not ready to sort of embrace and pick that up. So when someone spoke about R&D, we're seeing a lot of work, especially in the biotech space, to what you mentioned. That's a massive field, I think right now, which is getting really impacted. And the last one, which I would say is knowledge management. I think and you spoke about that on the way here, but I think today organizations have so much knowledge internally, and now they want to start using that. So we want to use it for new proposals, which we actually put out. Or if I get a proposal, especially some of the government ones are like full of large documents, you can start using Gen AI to summarize and get stuff out of it. But these are the big areas, I think, right now. But I would say the big challenge is a lot of people are thinking sequentially the way they used to do earlier. I think you now have a powerful tool, which you just need to think. I think quite.
I mean, since you talked of the food apps, I forget the name, but have you seen Myntra recently? And if any of you have, and Myntra has a Gen AI assistant. Anyone seen that? You have? Maybe a little bit, yeah. Huh? Match, okay. Nykaa also has, possibly. What does that one do? But still, that's not generative in that sense, right? I mean, it's matching, which could happen. Sorry, someone else here? No, I thought someone was here. So this one is a conversational assistant, which basically, so you say, you know what, I want to go to Ladakh. Okay, and I'm going to Ladakh. So it'll ask you, okay, wow, why are you going to Ladakh? When are you going to Ladakh? Okay, and they'll say, I'm going to Ladakh, like you say, so okay, fine. So I can help you. What do you want? So I said, oh, now if I'm going to Ladakh, what should I wear? What should I, what should I be careful of? And so it's kind of, obviously it's Mintra, so it sells clothes. That's why it's clothes specific. And so it figures out, okay, that's what the temperature is going to be, etc., etc. Okay, it asks you questions about yourself. Who are you, or how tall are you, whatever. And then it starts showing you kind of not only outfits, but ensembles, okay, of, this is what you should do. So this now is a powerful here and now use, in a sense, and helping immediately people buy. But those few things that you said, Sudhir, now while we are seeing these things in marketing, we have started, contact centers and a few of these obvious ones. Have you, in your experience, started seeing, larger companies like banks, financial institutions, manufacturing companies, the big guys, auto companies? Is there any use cases potential you see there?
I see. I'm not sure they're all seeing them right now. But all of us today use the same app, for instance. Right? If you're an SBI customer or a Standard Chartered customer, we all use the same app. We don't need to, most likely in the future. I can design my own app and I can use it. And technology today will allow that. Or I might not even need an app. I can imagine banking through a ChatGPT interface. So where I log in and I say I need to make a payment to Jaspreet and do it from my Standard bank, and it just connects in the background and you get the money. So
auto GPT.
It's auto GPT. Yeah, I think in a way. So I think a lot of that is something which we will see in the future. Obviously, there are scenarios around wealth management, but that ends up being a combination of AI and Gen AI. How we want to represent some of that. So we'll see a lot more of that, I think, coming. There are regulations around that right now, especially on you really need to know what's happening, so that can stop it. But I think the generic stuff will. You just need to imagine a world with a very different set of interfaces, which I think is going to be exciting. Or we'll be designing our own apps. Just use any app here.
Great. Any comments on this one? Any questions you want to ask on different industries? Because I'm going to move out of industries to different things. Any industries you are interested in and you see?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because that I think is going to happen more and more. So for years we've heard this statement, right? Data is the new oil, and we've been using it for 10 years. But now I think for the first time, I'm really seeing powerful use cases of where you don't want your data to go out right now, because it can be scraped or be used by someone else right now, and that diminishes the value. So are you folks on Reddit? I'm sure folks are on Reddit, but the Reddit community leads just went on strike, right, for a period of time, because they felt a lot of the information was going out and being used by ChatGPT kind of applications. I think Craigslist famously did not even allow Google to scrape, any of their content now or earlier. So I think a lot of that will happen. Jaspreet wrote in his book, Tech Whisperer, how many years back? 4 years back, about data managers, right? So people who will manage your data and make sure you get value out of it.
Like wealth managers, you'll have data managers.
You'll have data managers. So I think So when I first heard it, I found very weird. Why would that happen? But now I can imagine any content which you put out, it may not be secretive, but just make sure you're getting money out of it. And then if you see how YouTube, how Facebook, how TikTok, I think they're rewarding the content creators. So we'll see a lot more of that happening. So people will just put a value to that to make sure it's not being used.
I was anticipating that question from you. Wow. Where was this? Sorry. Ah, interesting. Okay.
Your generation will do it.
Absolutely. Look,
It's not-
yeah, I was itching to answer this in the same way. You are going to face this, okay, but that's where you'll have to push ahead. It's the baggage people like old men like us carry.
I remember something as simple as email when we started using that in the office, and then I was trying to get people in the family to use email because it used to be Hotmail at that point of time, and then Gmail came in. But there was pushback. And I remember a lot of emails which I used to get from my dad was written in the format of a long inland letter, which used to come years, I think, back. But it took some time, and then everyone really embraced it. So I think that's going to happen. That's going to be inevitable, especially once you start seeing some success on the back of this. Yeah.
Slightly louder, if you don't know. Or can someone give me?
Check. LLMs like ChatGPT and all, because like it becomes more data like train on like, and that's where like the data management concept is critical, because say like, because the like I think in my mother's workplace as well, they've completely told like, do not ever put any proprietary information at all into these models because of the sensitivity surrounding it. So,
Yeah, I agree. And then even personal data, don't leak. I don't give your Aadhaar number anywhere. Please don't give your PAN number everywhere. Don't give your driving license. The only safe is your voter ID. I don't know. There's no money connected to that at least. So, but yeah, just be very careful on that. Make sure you have a virtual Aadhaar ID if you don't have it.
There was a question. Yeah.
So, McKinsey recently released something called Lily, which is using their knowledge base and is giving the basic answers right now. And if you look up an HBR article, which I think came in 2007, where McKinsey said it's going to disrupt its model around consulting with software. So that was almost 10 years back, actually, now. And McKinsey started building products and giving that to clients. So overall, you have to be very aware of where the differentiation is coming, where the value is coming. And I think there are organizations which figure that out. So I think consulting firms that bar keeps shifting, which it should, because I think they push the bar, and information which maybe was secretive or it was a secret sauce 10 years back, that has to change. And if companies don't change, they'll die. New companies will come and take their spot. So McKinsey is doing a great job on that right now. So let's see what happens. But they're predicting the way companies need to run in the future will change. This information which they have, they can provide that value. and they'll figure out another way to use that and deliver value to their clients.
Consultants and lawyers, man. My last question. Yeah. Okay, and we'll open it out or not. Okay, or we'll all go and have food or whatever. Okay, but my last question, really, since you mentioned Microsoft, you talked a little about Google, etc. And again, you've been in the industry, you watched these big techs, okay, from close and far distance. And it's very interesting. One of the things which I talk about in my 5 things in generative AI is that the big tech landscape might change. Okay. There's Microsoft, there's doing all the OpenAI stuff. There's Google with its Bard and catching up, etc. Amazon seemingly doing nothing. Apple, sometimes we hear, sometimes we don't. How do you see this kind of dynamic changing? How do you see these companies?
It's good speculation. But as I mentioned, right, Microsoft, I think they've been relevant the last 50 years. So I think they've cracked that in terms of cycles, whether they're winning or not winning. I think they figure a way. I think they've got a great enterprise person. You're Microsoft, right? So ex-Microsoft. So I think they figured that whole thing out. You could argue Google has a lot of information and data. So how will they end up utilizing that to their advantage? I think that's an open question, I think, around that. And then we were discussing internally in what works. And then I think companies like NVIDIA who are holding the chips, they have all the chips with them right now. I think they could look at some, I think, innovation in what they end up doing. Or it could be a new company which just comes up and wins this space because it's just going to be a very I think different space. I mean, a lot of us didn't know Google at the turn of the century, right? So Google just came around
2003, yeah.
So, so I think very tough to predict. I think Satya Nadella famously said, right?
Make Google dance, yeah.
So I think there's some good, interesting stuff happening there, but I'm not a betting man. Oh, no.
So, one of the things NVIDIA is doing, for example, and I think it's going to emerge, is NVIDIA is creating its own cloud. Like there's been Google Cloud #3, and then Microsoft Azure Cloud, and then AWS, which rules the roost. But now NVIDIA, I forget what they call it, but they're starting creating a new cloud, which is an entirely GPU cloud, high-powered computing cloud. And I think NVIDIA clearly will be one of the big. Amazon, on the other hand, is saying that we'll only be in the enterprise. We're not going to create our own chat GPT or anything of that kind. Apple secretive as always.
Or embedded, right? I mean,
but will basically, yeah. Every phone, every MacBook that comes, I think will have a edge. So I think, yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting.
But I think one thing for all of you, Jaspreet and I've been discussing and writing about it right now. So right time got about it. So we saw LLM, saw the chat GPTs. One massive problem is it's been trained on quote unquote Western data. And because that's what's really dominated the internet. And if you look at all the worries, I think, and the way we will end up using it in the next 5 years as kids come out of school, how they use it, I think there'll be a very subtle change in terms of our psyche and thinking. Because if everyone can imagine is using these LLMs, which are actually trained on, we spoke about the bias, but not a bias, it's the fact that most of the data,
the context,
the context or the content itself is Western generated. And even I would say the Eastern content is translated and it's been put on the net with a very Western lens. I think that's a big worry, I think, right now. And we've been pushing for the need getting an Indian LLM, a Bharat LLM, I think, whatever we call it, which is actually trained on India data. It's not tuned on India data. It's trained from scratch on India. And in fact, that should be true for every global South country, is my view. Because there is just so much rich content. It is not, unfortunately, available right now on the internet. But over the next few years, I'm hoping companies will build that. Government will build that in some form. And we've been calling it Gen AI instead of Gen AI.
JAN, Jan, for the people.
For the people. And I think that's a massive need right now. So this is beyond just tuning, it's going to be training. Because those weights are, those parameters, the weights which we call right now, or the way it gets trained on the feedback loop, no one really knows exactly how that. But I'm assuming it's not Indians who are training it right now. So it could be Indians sitting in the US, but it's a very Western outlook. So, and I think that's the biggest reason why I think we need to build something like that. And obviously, the Western countries have a head start I think on this, so US, I think particularly. So I think India needs to catch up. And then if you look at the whole DPI, the infrastructure, the digital public infrastructure which has been built in India, I think that actually gives a fantastic platform or a way in which something can be built, then all of us can use it in a very Indian context. So I'm hoping that we can.
Absolutely.
There were questions.
Yeah, one there, one there. You want to start?
The bigger business like in the future? Like, is it like a tech consulting side in which you have companies that are making like discrete GPT models for like internal use using that proprietary information, and they're more focusing on the technology itself? Or is it the consumer facing side in which you have a public service like ChatGPT? Like, what do you think is holds like the major chunk of that $2 to $4 trillion?
Yeah, so if you see the, I think key impact, I would say 3 areas, right? So a lot of people will start using Gen AI in their consumer-facing products on how you add value. I think there's going to be a lot what you've mentioned right now on the internal efficiency. So I would assume every company has its own equivalent of a chat GPT, which will just make things so easy, right? So if I want any specific data, I don't need to generate a report. I can go to this interface and then I can get some financial information or whatever I need. That most likely will take a existing model, and then I would use my internal data and train, I think, on it. So that I think is going to happen across the board. I think the cost with the next set of chips come out is just going to keep falling. So right now, maybe the cost is going to be high to train and tune. That's just going to go down. So I think that's a given. There are some companies which will choose to put products out there and try and make money out of that. So there'll be a lot of them. I think only a few will survive, because it's like look at Chat GPT, and if you look at the interfaces and the Auto GPT which we were talking about, we would just need 1 or 2 of them. I just choose, go to that, and that will be an ecosystem play where people actually come on.
Yeah. I may add, and we'll come to you. Just give me her and then you. Okay. I think if you look at their 3 point whatever trillion dollars that are there, that report puts a lot of it coming from the enterprise. Okay, the efficiency, productivity gains. Okay, using these models. I mean, the presumption is that consumer stuff might become free. Okay, so while it's $20 or whatever today, but the enterprise stuff and the verticals, therefore, which will be built for the enterprise, will be the ones which will be charged on. And so, how will ChatGPT make its money? It will be possibly on the API calls. Okay, that all the people are making their early on. So, I mean, those
some form of advertising.
Hopefully not, but
That's
Google.
Model.
I mean, there are at least I think 500 very bright engineers sitting in Google trying to figure out advertising for Bard. Okay, but let's see. Anyway, sorry, back to you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to know more about the Jan AI point. I remember Professor Jaspreet wrote an article on it.
Both of us, actually.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So I was reading about this startup called Karya AI, and they're actually doing this thing around. They're collecting training data from southern parts of India, from like the rural communities, and including those inclusive training data from multiple
regional languages, and they're doing something around that. So I just wanted to know how, like, if startups like these already exist right now in India, and when you talk about, like you mentioned that you have this opinion about Eastern data should also get included in these multimodal, like natural language processing models. So how much time do you think it'll take for countries like ours to get this fully functional chat GPT just for like India or like different countries?
Good question. Would say a long time if we. So there are two ways. I think it should be crowdsourced in some manner, then that can happen very quickly. So that might just create a whole ecosystem of companies which are specializing in specific parts of data right now, which is not available. So that could be a model, and then people can actually start selling that to other organizations which may just need to use it, I think, in some form. But that really needs to go viral, and you need a lot of companies which start creating it. You need funding to come in, I think, to that whole thing. For Chat GPT and for OpenAI, I would say it was easy because most of the stuff was available on at that point of time. So, and I'm sure there are a lot of companies doing it maybe already, but a couple of years.
Yeah. So just to give a context, I think the company you're talking about is that company which was on time also, right? That. So look, and again we were talking about it. I mean, it's this way. It's how deep you want that Bharat LLM to be. So Bharat LLM is a separate concept. Jan AI is a separate concept. Bharat LLM is the Indian LLM. Okay. If it gets served through the India stack, like the same way Aadhaar and UPI are, then it becomes free for everyone, like Aadhaar and UPI is for us, and it becomes Jan AI in that sense. Okay. But this one now, Sudhir, for example, had this thing. I mean, what is India context? It's not just language. Okay. It is about land being measured separately in every state. Somewhere it's Bigha, somewhere it's Nalli, somewhere it's Kanal, somewhere it's whatever. GPT doesn't capture that. Okay. Or it's things like what he was saying. If you can think of all India radio broadcasts which happened since the beginning of All India Radio or since the beginning of Doordarshan, imagine if we were to take all that data, that gives the culture, the history, the context of India, right? And that is the kind of data that you would need, okay, actually to kind of create. And so it would not, and that's where the crowdsourcing, will people come in and give that data? And then obviously there's the cost of the A400s, the A100s, etc. But look, if India could create a UPI Aadhaar, and that wasn't cheap, okay, but it transformed our lives, okay, and it transformed entrepreneurship, and it transformed a lot of corporates. The same thing can be done with that effort in this, but it's years. Okay. And much like all of this IT tech software stuff, you don't wait till the end, right? You kind of have something out there, we put it out there, and then build something more, build something more, build something. There was someone there, and we perhaps will make that the last question. So,
I haven't read your article, so I don't exactly know what all.
Oh damn! There goes half your marks.
That's all right.
Half because you haven't read mine, half because you haven't read yours yet.
That's full. Okay, so I
No,
do
no
get why
worries,
it's a good
please.
idea to have like relatively localized data, LLM trained on relatively localized data sets. So you want to know more about a certain culture, you want Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, whatever, you can train that on that. But I think when you spoke about the idea that the Chat GPT or whatever these Western LLM, these models have been trained on majorly Western or Westernized data. So isn't like that completely counterintuitive, the idea of creating a specifically Indian or specifically any nationalized AI or LLM model, because you're doing exactly what they've done, but specifically for that purpose? Wouldn't it be a better idea to?
You would use it in that context, right? I think that to me is the key thing. This was we'll discuss it next week, but in your ethics class, this was a classical self-driving car problem.
Trolley problem. Sorry.
Yeah, the same trolley problem. So self-driving car is going on the road, and kids are crossing. So there are various variations. And then different cultures give very different answers to what will actually happen, right? And then you really don't know who is programming that piece, but that car is maybe running everywhere in the world right now. So you'll end up with very different, I think, results on it. So the thing isn't, let's assume there are these 5 LLMs available. And then if I have a question on Brazil, I would want to use that particular LLM. So because they would have the context and the chances of me getting the right response are going to be, I think, a lot higher. Similarly, in India, if I'm trying to come up with a policy paper or something and I want to use it, I would want something which is trained on the Indian local context and data. So I didn't use the early versions of ChatGPT, but I heard if you try what should I have for breakfast, it would give me a very English breakfast at that point of time. Now it's changed, so it's giving maybe a more localized version.
Don't you think that risks that LLM becoming kind of like an echo chamber? That specific idea is being propagated by that LLM.
It's happening anyway with ChatGPT, right?
I mean, there are like they try to be as objective as possible, but with this, I think the idea would be to like emulate.
It'll be the same. It'll be in the Indian context. It'll be as objective. With there are risks around, but those risks still are there right now. And I think longer term, it's negative for the whole world, not just for India. That if you're just dependent on, because these things, it's not a black and white objective answer which you're seeking. It has
nuances,
cultural nuance, everything which is actually built in. And you just keep reinforcing a particular viewpoint, which is how it gets trained. I think that's the big risk, that you'll actually lose out a lot of other viewpoints.
And look, you're right. I mean, a lot of people, for example, in a way you're right, but we can't escape that, to be honest. Okay, a lot of people, for example, believe ChatGPT is woke. Okay, because it's written by Silicon Valley, more left of center, and therefore it says if you ask it about President Trump, it doesn't use very good language. On the other hand, President Obama is like whatever, and so it's kind of woke. And Trump's Truth GPT or whatever, which he wants to build, or X GPT, he wants it to be right wing. Okay, and so those, I mean, since it's the closest. Again, remember we talked about the fact that these are large language models, and language is us, and so our biases will get reflected in it. Okay, and some of those things are going to happen, but it's not right to have just. I mean, it's better to have multiple ones. Okay, and rather than having just one which has one viewpoint. Okay, in that sense. Yeah. Lovely. Any last question or comment? Otherwise,
computers without internet, by the way. So my first computer at home was a computer without internet. And, today you'd probably just imagine what would you do with, the internet blips for a second, you're up in arms. So then we had the dot-com boom, but you also had the dot-com bust. And that was because at that time, what was it, 2000 or earlier, 2001? Almost every startup was called .com. And I'm seeing it's a little bit of deja vu, right? Every startup today is AI. So what do we do with the benefit of history that there is a boom and a bust that we can actually prevent? Because there's a lot of investor money, there's a lot of a lot of them will get into AI startups. A lot of them will be involved in AI related work. Is there something that can be done to avoid an AI bust, which happened to other technologies in the past?
Maybe some lessons learned, I think, on the back of it, but unfortunately, the VC money was flowing. Now it's, I think, stalled a bit. But the suspicion is the money will still flow, right? Once we get out of the current macroeconomic backlog or where we're stuck right now. But I would just say fail fast. is, I think that's going to be the mantra. But some will survive, and that's just how capitalism actually works. And I think people will learn, and they'll just move on to the next, the next gig. I think that's going to happen. So.
And I think one of the things we learned, which is happening here, Priyank, is at that time, the one big difference at that time, people didn't bother about a business model. Okay, that how will it make money? Is it making money? Today, people bother about the business model. So while ChatGPT is losing money, but it's also making money in the sense that it's a revenue play. It's more than $1 billion annualized revenue right now. And then people are saying, okay, fine, you know what? The costs of it, because of its technology, the costs of it, we will figure out how to reduce. Because, these GPUs in fact, the GPU cost, just the cost of this GPU has actually plummeted by 90% in the last 4 or 5 years.
It's going to keep dropping.
And it's going to keep dropping. And so if you have a revenue plan there, the costs will. And so I think that's something which we learned. I hopefully will continue doing that.
High risk, high gain. I mean, goes back to the Microsoft example which I was giving. If you read Bill Gates' book, The Road Ahead, he said the connection speed was so pathetic and the experience was so bad. He thought no one's going to use this for the next 5 years and 4 years, whatever time frame they had. He had in mind. But because just the excitement of the internet or what was on the other side was so exciting that people actually used it. Microsoft lost 3-4 years, I think, on that. So you might have been or after that.
I was in the slightly winning part of Microsoft.
So I think people who will there are people in this current boom will risk it, but not everyone's going to win. I think on the back of it. So I think that's going to be reality. But I think at least the VC folks think they've got it worked out. 1 in 10 or 1 in 50 will succeed. So at the end, it will happen. And then people who go in, if you do a startup, you'll actually learn a lot. So also the folks who go in startups learn a lot, move on to the next startup. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom. That time was really bad because the only model was advertising, right? That's what people thought. Somehow get eyeballs on your website, and we'll get ads, and everyone will make money. So no one did the math, I think. So
great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sudhir, for this philosopho-technical discussion, okay, on enterprise use cases and, therefore what we should be doing in this world. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in, and we shall meet. I need to give hang on for a moment. Yeah. Sit. Thank you, Sudhir, for coming all the way. And thanks, everyone, for being here. Picture.